Welcome to Slope Reliability, the show where we learn about reliability, observability, and resilience one day at a time. I'm your host, Stephen Townsend. As an SRE, how do you influence senior leadership to get support and priority for the things that you care about? To help answer that question, I'm joined today by Nora Jones, who's a recognized leader in software reliability and resilience engineering. She founded Jeli, an innovative platform for deep incident analysis, acquired by PagerDuty in 2023, where she now leads product strategy, growth, and pricing. Nora's impactful experiences as a software engineer at Netflix, Slack, and Jet.com shaped her unique approach, emphasizing the human aspects of operational excellence. She's co-author of the influential O'Reilly book, Chaos Engineering, System Resiliency in Practice. She advocates passionately for psychologically safe environments. Love that. Nora founded the Learning from Incidents community in 2019, bringing together industry leaders to enhance organizational resilience through continuous learning. Welcome, Nora. It's so good to have you on the show.
Thank you so much, Stephen. I'm happy to be here.
Yeah. Are you having a good day?
I am having a good day. How's your day going?
It's going great. Apart from the fact that we just recorded 15 minutes and I forgot to hit the record button. So we're going to have to cover it.
I didn't know if we were just going to play into it and pretended that we just started talking. But
I'm going to be honest with the audience and just open them up into the context.
Yeah, we just had a great conversation that we thought was recording for 15 minutes. But now we'll have a new great conversation.
So we're talking around this theme of convincing stakeholders, especially in the world of reliability or resilience, which I think is really challenging. And one of the things that I came at, when I wanted to talk about this topic with you, I immediately thought of it from the view of, as an SRE or maybe an SRE first level manager, how do I influence and connect with senior leaders? But you had an interesting point. It needs to go both ways because it's not just, you have to have empathy from both sides and understanding from both sides. So you want to elaborate a little bit more about that?
Yeah, absolutely. And I spent a lot of my career as an engineer working in incidents and in reliability in a lot of cases. And then I've gotten the opportunity to be the CEO of a company, and now I'm in a senior leadership role at a public company. And so I've really seen a lot of different sides of the coin with reliability, but also roadmap planning. What I really see is a big lack of understanding of each other's worlds and what folks need to do in order to keep the company up and running from their individual perspective. But everyone has a very important side of that coin. And they're all necessary in order to keep things moving and in order to keep the business growing and running.
How do you get an engineer, someone who's, say, really interested in the detail and technology and solving really complex problems? How do you get them engaged and interested in the business and how it's running and the strategic decisions being made? Is it a challenge? Are there situations where then you're never going to get them to really invest in that?
Are you asking me like as a manager?
Yeah. Like, have you come across?
I definitely have encountered engineers like that. I've encountered engineers that want to have a lot more understanding of business functionality and how their job actually relates to the bottom line. And I think that's the hallmark of being a senior engineer, is being curious about some of those things. I think with the engineers that I've worked with in the past that are really kind of deep in their worlds are very valuable as well, but they might be missing the context and how the depth that they work on actually contributes to the growth and the bottom line of the company. And so they need that context, and I think that scoping more than ever. Otherwise, you could end up in a situation where you're over investing in things that might actually not be necessary in the way that you think they are.
Yeah, I've already seen that in my short time as a manager already. One of the things that we mentioned last time we recorded is that you spent a year at Lund University. Is it Switzerland?
Sweden.
Oh, the other, yes. In Sweden, studying human factors in system safety. So we talked about that. That's really fascinating for me. I don't know if I could do it. It's too much of a commitment, I think. But yeah. And you were talking about one of the things you covered was about bad actors? Is it bad actors or?
Yeah. So I did that program for about a year. And part of my curiosity in it is like, I've worked in incidents my whole career. I worked in incidents at a home security and smart home company, but like on the hardware side. And then I've done mostly software companies outside of that. But one of the things I've really noticed is how much of an art reliability is rather than like a specific science a lot of the time too, and how much humanness there's involved in it, and how you get people information, how you collaborate with people on the importance of things to work on and why. And if people don't have that aligned North Star that they're working towards, they're going to be operating under what they think is right. And you're going to end up with a bunch of different pieces of the puzzle that don't quite fit well together. And so I was interested in the program because it was cross-disciplinary. So there were folks throughout other industries that were also dealing with accidents and incidents and how they understood them afterwards and how they fed those ideas back into management. And guess what? Like they're all kind of dealing with the same things. And that tells me it is a lot more, again, like the art piece rather than the science piece. And I think as engineers, we try to solve everything with code a lot of the times, either with code or just with talking to each other in our own worlds. And so part of it was to like challenge my own curiosity as well. And then within the program, I got really interested in understanding more ends of the spectrum. I was like, wait, I've really only been an SRE before. I spent a little bit of time on like the sales side as an account manager, along with a software engineering role, but I really didn't have a full understanding of all sides of the coins of a business. And I was like, how can I properly investigate an accident if I don't have that true empathy and understanding? And I was really interested in like forming my own company around helping everyone get that context. And it was like meant to help everyone talk to each other after accidents to really align. But I was also myself getting to be in a CEO seat for the first time and really see it myself. And a lot of my viewpoints really evolved and changed from who I was when I started that organization as well, because I hadn't been in that role before.
It must have been intense. To go from, did you sort of say to yourself, I'm going to put the SRE aside for a moment and focus on this new thing? Or was it really deliberate that you took make that big shift? Because I've been at a way smaller thing. I've kind of done that management. I've kind of put, I said, I'm not going to do the hands-on technical for a while, at least, just while I focus on learning this thing,
Yeah. I think I see a lot of folks that are stepping into a new position, whether it's like first-time management or first-time CEO or first time in another thing. They have this like awkward middle period where they're like, ooh, the only thing I'm good at right now is the thing I used to do. And I'm not quite good at the thing that I'm supposed to be doing now. And so they kind of like are in this in-between world where they're doing a little bit of the things that they used to do as they're learning this new thing, because I think it's an ego thing a lot of the time, like they're trying to feel valuable. I certainly fell victim to that. I was really trying to stay out of the weeds of the code and some of the system design, but I was also trying to give context into what we were trying to accomplish. And I think I found in the beginning, I either swung too far one way or too far the other. And I needed to find like a middle ground a little bit better. But I think as a CEO, you really have to lean in on what only you can do and hire people around what you can't do or what you need help with. But you are fully responsible for setting the vision, for making sure the company is growing, for making sure you have the right team. And that needs to be your full focus, right? Everything else is kind of auxiliary, and that can be distracting and can lead to failure sometimes. I've definitely seen technical CEOs that like are just fully making a really great code base and really great architecture and really great design docs in case you need to look for things later, and really great scaling thoughts, but they're not really thinking about the go-to-market side of things. And that a business doesn't exist without that. And looping back to what we were talking about earlier, I think that is a piece that a lot of SREs miss sometimes after incidents, is the sharp end of go-to-market and the expertise some of that really required to keep a company up and running.
Yeah. In the previous bit we recorded, I asked about the Toyota production system, the idea of the Gemba walk where the CEO goes to the factory floor. We talked a bit about two things. One is, could that be possible in tech? And the second thing is, could you do the reverse where the people in a hands-on SRE is able to walk in some way of the CEO or
Yeah, I think there are some walks that both parties can do, right? Like, I do think it is really important for an executive to, or a manager to see what folks go through in the midst of incidents. I think the challenge, and you and I were talking about this before, is they're not going to have the responsibility that the SRE does in that moment. But it is good to get some of the understanding and the empathy. And then I think on the reverse side, I think SREs actually like going to a sales call or even watching a sales call that was recorded, I think can be really fascinating information too, because if a business isn't selling product or growing product or retaining product, like there's nothing to really be an SRE for, right? And so it's just like keeping that context in mind of like why you're doing what you're doing and how that the sales matter the most in a lot of these situations. And sales come from value and retention comes from value. And so I think it is really important for that reverse walk, like you were talking about, like they could go to a customer call. I know Honeycomb did the like employee board member type thing, but it is a little bit different. And in the same way I was talking about earlier with the responsibility, like they're not having the responsibility to close the sale. So they're never going to fully get it. And they're not having the responsibility to report to the board. So they're never going to fully get it. Just as in the other way, they're never going to have the responsibility to fix the incident and the responsibility to be coherent at 2 a.m. when something's happening. And so I think there is just a lot more curiosity and empathy that needs to come from both sides to really drive the right changes and priorities.
You said something last week. If you want to speak to senior leadership, understanding like what are the 2 or 3 things top of mind for those leaders at that time, and being able to understand how you can contribute to that or help them with that or engage at that level and using the right language as well. But even then, I feel like reliability and to even greater extents, resilience, ideas and initiatives are just so hard to talk about. I work in a big corporate, and as you said, what makes money? It's the new features that we're getting to the customers.
Right.
There's a lot less interest about the resilience and the human socio-technical systems that are used to build these things and run them. I'm finding it really hard to have those conversations. You got any tips on how do you begin to cross that divide?
Yeah, and I think you're probably closer than you think you are in terms of how you relate those things together, because like you said, the focus is on gaining revenue, and new features do that sometimes, right? Customers need to see that you're shipping stuff. I'm sure that you are responsible for a few vendors at your company, and you probably want to see them shipping stuff and fixing stuff, right? And so that is really important in order to retain customers. But what's also important is that the product is dependable. And there's definitely a line of like what level of reliability a customer is willing to put up with. I've talked with various businesses just from jobs I've had where they're like, what we notice is if we're down, the user leaves the site and they still come back and they still spend money with us. That is a really nice gift that particular business has. That's not the gift that every business has. And so I think if you're an SRE, you really have to think about like, is my company going to lose money if we're down? And that is really what's going to help you understand some of how you can influence prioritization, how you can build it into new feature requests. But my big recommendation is when you're at the point where you're pulling your hair out and you're feeling like you've just been sharing this thing over and over and over again and no one's hearing you. That's where I would pause and actually start asking questions, because there's definitely a reason why those things aren't getting prioritized. It's not that no one's hearing you. It's not that you haven't said it in the right way. It's that you might not be hearing something else that's going on that might actually be of higher importance, or there might be that thing that's going on that actually relates to what you're talking about. And then you can find a way to relate what you're feeling and what you're working on and what you're feeling like is really underwater to that high priority business goal as well.
Yeah. I don't know if it's a good thing or not. I used to get really caught up in trying to calculate in financial terms the impact of, and back in the day, performance, and now more reliability. And it's really hard to get a meaningful number. It's a bit like trying to repick these metrics and reliability, and a lot of the time they're meaningless. But I've kind of fallen back in the last couple of weeks to realizing a little bit of napkin math is fine to open a conversation, and then probably people who are better at that kind of thing can get to the detail of it.
Yeah. And I think that napkin math is totally fine to have a conversation, but really it's, as you're doing that napkin math, I think what's important to consider is your business's KPI, like how it makes money, right? If you're working at an e-commerce company, you can totally map the cost of downtime, right? Like that's going to be very important for senior leaderships because revenue is predictable. And so if add to cart isn't working or checkout isn't working, that revenue gets less predictable. And so senior leadership's going to be immediately aligned. If you're at an organization where that's not the case and downtime isn't as easily correlated to revenue, I think there's other ways you can approach it, which is like, hey, did you know that we actually spend 7 human hours across this many people per day dealing with this one thing? And if we didn't, this is what would happen. And even just like totaling average salaries of folks involved, like that can also help start a conversation. Like I think playing the role of an honest broker in these, if you don't have the full power in your organization, can also be really helpful in rallying people around a story.
That's awesome. Thank you. When I go back and edit this, I'm going to take extra note of that. I think it's a great way to put it. I think particularly resilience engineering, I'm pretty new to it. Join the community on Slack. I'm consuming content. I wonder how compatible, because I've had some conversations with my peers, with some other leaders at IAG, I work at different, about some of the ideas. A lot of it, I'm talking about systems thinking. I'm sort of saying, we are building this really, really complex thing. And as much as it's nice to kind of fool ourselves into thinking we can control it, we can't, right? It's just, and people don't want to hear that. Is it compatible, do you think, these ideas with all organizations? Or do you think sometimes I guess my question is, do you need to be careful? Is it compatible with all organizations? Is it something you should try and put everywhere? Or sometimes is it just not the right time?
I think it is so organization specific. I think you really, really have to meet people where they're at in terms of both your leaders, your peers, and your organization. We've all joined organizations, and in our first 2 weeks of that organization, we see something that's deeply broken, right? Like that's happened to all of us. And we have to take a moment to decide, was that, like I've seen actually that work better before, but there has to be a reason behind how and why it's operating this way. And so I think the very first thing I would encourage with folks that are trying to impart more systems thinking or resilience thinking in their organization is to start doing that themselves, with getting curious about how and why things work the way they do now, because there's for sure a reason behind it. Because I think if you don't do that, you're never going to take others with you, and you can't do this by yourself as a solo mission. And so my biggest piece of advice is to make sure that you are being gregarious with your efforts and that you are building relationships through this and understanding points of view. And that might mean, someone is using language that's maybe not aligned with like resilience engineering. And that's okay, right? Like you don't need to hone in on that and try to get them to change their language. It's understanding how they frame things a little bit more and how the system works in your company, because again, there's definitely a reason behind it. I think sometimes I see it framed as this like massive mission, when really it can be done in some of these like day-to-day micro interactions that can really help start to move things. And that's where I'd recommend folks starting.
Something I'm really taking away from this talk today is to have empathy first, ask more questions. If you want to make a difference, rather than trying to force the change, understanding more. It's a bit like the resilience. So understand the system first before you try.
Understand the system first, gather the data, and talk about it, right? I think it can be so helpful to have an artifact between you and whomever else you're talking to, so that you're both orienting around the same thing, and it's not necessarily theoretical. Like, hey, we had 7 alerts go off at 2 a.m. Like, let's look, can we look at that together? Because I'm thinking it's taking a lot of time. And here's how I'm thinking my team could be moving the needle otherwise, and sort of framing it in that regard. And I want to go back to what you were saying earlier about like trying to convince senior leadership of some of these things. As someone that has had to be in that role in a couple different organizations, and I do enjoy it, I have never context switched as much as I have, right? Like I am context switching all the time. Even just today, I had a customer meeting this morning. I had QBR planning. I had roadmap planning. I interviewed someone, and then I went to a podcast, right? It's like all sorts of different hats I have to wear. And so when someone's coming to me and saying, Nora, this thing is really important, we have to work on it, my attention span is, I only have a certain amount of time to consume what they're telling me and then make a decision off of that. And so I think that's really important context to hold for folks, is like, is what the other person that you're talking to might be holding in that moment, and what you really want the outcome to be. So it's like, okay, so-and-so has 10 minutes of my time today. What I really want the outcome to be is I get time to work on this database issue next quarter. Right. And so you're working backwards from that. Like, and you're thinking about like, okay, what do they need to hear right now? Like, what do they want to know? What are they weighing as roadmap options in their head right now? And so, yeah, like, I think you're absolutely right. It's like taking that understanding and that empathy and really building towards a common outcome, rather it being like you versus them. It's you both versus the problem. And I think that really helps de-escalate people and situations too.
A little segue, but you talk about context switching. There's one of the things that puts me off. Like, already I'm context switching all day. Yep. It puts me off becoming a more senior leader, because it just seems like it would be so much worse, and you've got so many more voices who need things.
Yeah. Yeah.
Is it hard to manage? Like, is it hard to keep sane with so much context switching?
Totally. And I think where I see people have a hard time with management is really trying to keep focused on like individual humans and their experiences, rather than thinking about the system as a whole as a leader, because you will get so burnt out if you're trying to think about like every single individual and every single piece of the system too. And you're going to lose sight of that overall capacity. And so I think it's like knowing when to drill down and knowing when to keep your head up and knowing when to change that level of altitude is like a skill set that gets built. And I know what you're going through. And I think so much of it is practice, and you get better at it over time because you have practiced. But I think you're right. Like, the context switching is very hard, and it gets more so the more senior you get more meetings on your calendar too. But it's necessary to keep everybody aligned and moving towards the same goal.
Yeah. One of the things you mentioned last week is that not only understanding, if you're going to speak to leadership about something, understanding what's top of mind for them, having a goal in mind, but also, I don't know if this is something I wrote down in my notes or something you said, be creative about how you present ideas.
Yeah.
Have you ever had someone come to you with a really creative way of like storytelling or getting idea across, or asking for something? Or on the flip side, were you involved in, say, maybe creatively presenting to leadership in the past?
Yeah. I remember one org I was at, I saw an issue right away. I saw it in my first few weeks, and I presented it to folks, and they were like, cool, right? Like, no one did anything about it. And so I remember, like, I kept doing my regular job, and then I presented it again a month later, and I still got the same reaction. And then 6 months later, I presented it in a completely different way, and everyone was like, oh my gosh, we have to do this now. And I was like, that's what I've been saying. And I sort of had to reflect on like, okay, what did I do differently this time than I didn't? And like, some of what I did differently was I built relationships. I built more trust with these folks. I learned how this particular organization received and disseminated information. And I was presenting it in a way before that they weren't necessarily used to. And so it wasn't being heard as much as it necessarily could have been. And so I do like, there's a lot of fun, creative ways you can present to folks, but I think it's also really about knowing your audience, right? Like a 70-page incident review, no exec's going to read that, right? But data points on what the top 7 paying customers were experiencing during that incident review and who they need to call and go do an apology tour with, that's something that they'll probably read, right? So it's like knowing your audience in various situations to really get the things done that you feel need to get done, but also have curiosity and openness that the things you think need to get done might actually not need to be a priority.
I remember a while back when I was still a performance test engineer, I sent out this weekly report on the performance of this system that we were building at the time. And it was very visual. It just had like scatter plots and charts and very graphical. And it just, something about having visuals, it just got people interested. And so I had like senior leaders saying, can you please add me to the distribution list? And I'm like, why would you know this? It's like, because it looks pretty and they want it, they get drawn in.
And it's easy to grok, right? Like the people do react to visuals. And that, goes back to what I was talking about earlier with the honest broker. Like when I've been in organizations where I don't have a decision-making power and I have to lead by influence, I fall back into the role of that honest broker where I'm just like, hey, I'm just presenting the data. And this is the data. This is not necessarily like my opinion on things, but this is the trends I'm seeing. And that helps people really rally around things and gets them to start seeing what you already know to be true.
Well, thank you so much for coming on and having a chat with me today and for generously context switching from the other things you've been doing.
Yeah, no, of course.
What's next for you? What are you excited about at the moment? What are you working on?
Yeah. So, I mean, I'm leading pricing at PagerDuty now, which has like been a very, very fun shift for me. I have a lot of context just from operating as an end user of how value comes to be and what the user wants to see out of some of the pricing. And so it's been really fun to sort of mix the math and like the customer psychology behind it. And I'm also focused on product strategy. I'm playing around with all the new software tools that are coming out, which has been a lot of fun. And I found that it's been easier for me to get my ideas on paper faster and like rally people around them. So yeah, I'm enjoying things these days in like a different capacity than I've been in before.
That's so cool. Thanks again for coming on, and to everyone else out there, I hope you have a wonderful week, and I'll see you next time.
Awesome. Thanks, Stephen.